So what does success really look like for independent artists in the music business? This is a huge question that every single independent artist needs to answer. And some of the answers that I've seen out there on the internet and some of the comments in my videos have frightened me at how backwards they are. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how to define success in the music business as an independent artist. And it actually kind of reminds me of this story that I heard from a guy named John Mayer. Some of you guys know who John Mayer is, right? He's one of the world's most famous guitar players. And at one point he was doing a lecture at Berkeley. And he talked about this friend he had who had just sold 2 million records. Now I want you to sit there and think for a second. If you had just sold 2 million records, how would you feel emotionally right now? You'd probably feel pretty happy, right? You'd probably be ecstatic. Like, I just sold 2 million records, and this is, at a time now where people don't really buy records very much. So he was talking to his friend, John Mayer was, and he was like, hey, how you doing? And the guy was miserable. And John couldn't figure out at first, like, why is my friend miserable? He's literally attained the success that, like, we all kind of dream of, or that we all want to maintain, right? For John to maintain, right? And he figured it out. He looked back and he said, man, the reason that my friend is so miserable, despite the fact they've sold millions of records and made millions of dollars as a consequence, is because they never defined what it truly meant to be successful. They didn't set up their expectations properly and have a definitive point where they could say, I am a success now. And so that's one of the most important things that we need to actually do, is define what success means. Because for every artist out there, there's going to be a slightly different interpretation as to what success means. Because for all of us, that means different things. And I'm going to break down some of the two branches that most people fall into when it comes to what success looks like in the music business. Okay, the first one is kind of obvious. It's monetary success, financial success, making money, right? A lot of people hate this, especially the artists in my comment section. They get really mad at me. They're like, why is everyone always talking about money as a success? Well, here's the reason. Because when you're trying to become a professional musician, what that really means is you're trying to make music your livelihood. You're trying to make music pay the bills. So if that's the goal that you're trying to pursue, you have to take the financial side of this seriously. You have to actually look at your music like a business, because if you're going to be a professional musician, that's mandatory. Now listen, if you're not going to be a professional musician, you're going to be a hobbyist musician, you more kind of do stuff on the side, it's not really a big passion of yours, then no, you don't really have to focus on that side very much because it's more of a hobby. But for us that have decided that we're going to do this to have that be our livelihood, we have to focus on business. So you have to actually establish what that looks like. So for John Mayer's friend, they didn't establish what dollar amount actually equated to success. So once they passed it, they didn't even know. So they were still not successful in their eyes because they never actually defined what that is. So that's what I want you to do real quick, is I want you to think for yourself, what is the first milestone that I'm trying to get to? Because if we look at our goals and we view it like a ladder, okay? If I'm trying to climb a ladder and the next rung in the ladder is like 20 feet above me, man, good luck me getting up this ladder, right? It's going to be impossible to climb. And when I look at how high that rung is, I'm like, how am I going to get there? However, if the rungs are really close to each other and I can just climb it like very easily like this, yeah, it's little tiny bits. I'm making incremental progress up the ladder, but I can actually start to move up the ladder because I've got a grip on where I'm going. So financially, you have to actually figure out what those goals look like. A lot of artists have never actually asked themselves the question, how much money do I want my music to generate me every single month? A lot of people have not thought about that question, and it's an important question because if you want to have any measurement of success as an artist, you have to be able to know, well, every month I make about X dollars from my music. And you probably make a certain amount of money from your job, right? Let's say you make $2,000 to $5,000 a month from your job. Well, you know how much money you're making every single month from your job. You should know how much money you're making every single month from your music and have a goal to match that 9 to 5. We talked about this in another video where I talk about the path of financial independence for an artist. And to summarize, you need to identify how much money you're generating from your 9 to 5, right? And figure out how much money do I need to generate from music to match that or go above it, higher than that. That's the first place we need to start aiming for. Heck, you could even go smaller than that. You could even create smaller gaps in the ladder and say, okay, here's how much money I'm making from my 9 to 5. I'm going to try to make half of that from music alone. You can start small and build up to these kind of things, right? But if you don't have your sights set on a specific number, you're kind of just walking out there blind, and you may cross your goal and never realize it. That's a problem, and that's what John Mayer's friend ended up in that position for, is because they never defined specifically what that meant to make it monetarily speaking, okay? So don't just sit around and ignore the money because some people find it uncomfortable to talk about money. Put it this way, if you're going to become a professional musician, you need to get real comfortable real fast with talking about money. It's not a dirty word. You know, in the Bible, they say the love of money is the root of all evil, right? Well, it's the love of money, not just money, generally speaking, right? So hopefully everyone understands that it's kind of a necessity to focus on. And it doesn't make you like less of an artist or not a pure artist because you're thinking about money. Because there's so much cultural indoctrination for artists to where if you start to think about business in any capacity, people in your group and even artists amongst each other are like, oh, you're being greedy, you're, bending to the system or whatever it is, right? When really, we're just trying to create a livelihood. We're trying to create something that generates enough monthly revenue so that we can pay our bills and live comfortably. That doesn't mean we're living luxuriously, but we can live comfortably from what we're earning. Those are the goals that we have. And so looking at the monetary side of your music business is going to be an absolute necessity, because if you don't dial in those numbers, you don't know really what you're working with. Okay? So that's the first side of it. Now the second side of this, it's kind of on the other side of the spectrum here, because we think about what other kind of success could you have other than monetary? I had someone ask this recently. They're like, why do they always view it as financial success? And what else could you view success as? Well, impact. I think that's a huge one. What kind of impact did you make? Now, let me clarify something. Impact does not mean every single person in the whole world knows who I am. That's one form of impact. But what I'm talking about is a lot more rich, I think, and fulfilling, because it's not about how many people we reach. It's about how much we reach the people that we interact with. So like, my band is not the biggest band in the world by a long shot. But when you get comments from people saying, wow, these lyrics just spoke to me at the right time in my life. I really needed to hear this. Thank you. Making a difference in somebody's life with your music can almost be 10 times more fulfilling than monetary gains that you get from your music. In fact, they're just kind of different types of enjoyment when I really think about it. Like when I think of the enjoyment that I have, like the other night when I went and played a festival, we made about $1,000 just flying out to some town in Kansas. Some of y'all know that Cherryvale, Kansas exists. It's a little tiny town in Kansas. Just go up there and make a quick $1,000 and come back. That's a certain type of, yeah, I got that rush and we did good in that sense. But then when the people come up to you at the merch table and they're saying things like, oh, you guys, that was such an amazing show. That one song really spoke to me and I really needed to hear that. Or you see the comments on the YouTube videos later and you see the impact. That's a different kind of fulfillment, right? And I think they're equally as valid. And I think as artists, sometimes we have inclinations to pursue one more than the other, but we always are looking to pursue both a lot of the times that I've noticed. So it's not that like artists either want all money and no impact or all impact and no money. We all want a little bit of both, right? But depending on your disposition, you may be more inclined to focus on getting the business set up and making the money come in. And some of you may be more focused on, well, how do I impact people's lives with my music? And I think those two things are not opposites, they're yin and yang, right? You have to figure out how to balance those for each of your music businesses. Notice that the conversation of success is not necessarily about, here's what you have to do, right? It's more about, for yourself and what your life goals are, you need to define what those are so that you can identify what making it or success really looks like. So for some of you, monetarily, maybe $60,000 a year, slightly above the average median income here in America. Let's say that is your goal. If you could just live a basic average income life on your music, you would be the happiest camper in the world. That's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that goal whatsoever. And I would equally say There is nothing wrong with the person who, if they ask themselves honestly what they really want, just like the other person said, if I'm honest, man, if I made 60K, I'd be a happy camper. Other people may say, Dax, if I'm being honest with myself, I kind of want to make $1 million a year. That's equally as valid of a pursuit. But what you need to know is that's a different mindset. That's a different approach. That's a different game altogether. But notice how if it's a different game altogether to try to make $1 million a year versus $60,000 a year, notice you're going to have to do different things. And a lot of people are operating in the music business under this generalized assumption that there's like a one-size-fits-all solution for what they're going through. And the honest reality, there's a couple of people out here that will be honest with you, like myself and Dave Rose and all kinds of people like that, but there is not one thing that's going to fix your music business and fix everything monetarily for you overnight. There's not the one thing that, if I just fix this one thing, I'm going to be set financially forever. It's never really like that. So we have to figure out for ourselves what our goals are. And then when you know what your goals are, you can take this certain set of actions required to achieve that specific goal. Like I said, the approach that you're going to have to take to make $60,000 a year and $1 million a year are similar, but at scale, there's a lot more effort in the $1 million a year than there is in the $60,000 a year, right? But there's a lot of the same processes going on. You still need to get more fans in business. We call that lead generation. You need to have those fans be able to support you financially. We call that customer acquisition in business, right? You need to figure out, how am I going to figure that I'm going to get monthly income? That's like a fan club, maybe a Patreon, something like that. We call that monthly recurring income. You see, the idea here is you have to set these things up to actually get the ball rolling, get the money flowing in, but you also have to understand what you're pursuing and at what extent do you need to push that. Like if you're trying to make $1 million a year, you're going to have to sell a lot of fan club subscriptions. You're going to have to get a lot of streams. You're going to have to sell a lot of merch, a lot of tickets, and go and play in shows. That's going to be probably required if you want to get to that level, right? There's a lot more required as opposed to someone who wants to make $60,000 a year doing more stuff at home, right? It's very possible. I know people that are musicians and they're actually traveling, what do they call them now? Digital nomads, where they're teaching guitar and they're traveling the world. That's pretty cool, right? All from their knowledge, so they can be musicians and they can go travel the world and be musicians, but they can also provide a service all around the world. Doesn't matter where they're at. You can teach guitar, piano, vocals, whatever it is. And I know people like that personally, and it's so cool to see musicians taking their entrepreneurial skills seriously. They didn't start that way, mind you. The people that I know, they started out, it was rough. It was a tough beginning. Luckily, they had mentors. I totally recommend having mentors and coaches. I have them myself. So total disclaimer, by the way, if you know somebody out there who claims to be a coach like I am, and they don't have a coach themselves, I think that's kind of hypocritical, but that's a video for another day. The whole point is, I saw these people who didn't really have entrepreneurial skill sets to begin with, get the right information, get the right implementation put into their business, and now they're digital nomads. Like, you can't do that if you're not making some money. I'm just telling you that right now. So that may be your goal. Maybe your goal is to be someone who can travel the world and just do that kind of thing. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's like, I'd rather just find a cool little plot of land and just get that set up with my family and just chill. That's what I would rather do. Okay, awesome. There's going to be a specific set of actions required to get either one of those outcomes. And so if you identify for yourself what those things are going to be, now you're actually going to be more likely to attain it because you've got your eye focused on it. You know the whole concept of if you bought a red car, tomorrow you're going to hit the road and all you're going to see out on the road with you are red cars? Why is that? Because the brain is really good at seeing what it's focused on. So if you're in a red car, you're focused about all in this red car that you just got. Red car is on the brain's mind. So what is the brain looking for? Red cars. Right? Just like if you know what your goal is and you're focusing on your goal, you can actually start to move closer to it. You can see the things that you need to see in order to attain the goal because your vision is focused on something that's actually going to bring you closer to it, right? If you're just ignoring your goals and distracted by, I could go get a tripod tomorrow or whatever the thing is, then it's going to be harder to reach those goals because you'll be going towards it and then you'll get distracted and you'll go off this way. And you'll be focusing on it, and you'll get distracted and go this way. So maintain focus on your goals and actually establish them. But here's the thing, you can't focus on what's not there. So sit down with a piece of paper. It's very simple. Sit down with a piece of paper and write out these big picture goals. And when I say write this down, get real specific. What do you want your life to look like? I remember I sat down and I said, okay, this is the type of house I want to live in. This is the type of conversation I want to have with my family for breakfast. This is the type of lunch and day I'd like to have. I sat down and wrote those things all out. Why? Because if I'm ever going to live the most optimal, integrated, good life that I can, I have to focus on what it is I actually want out of life. And if you sit down and you write down exactly how much money you want to make, how much impact you want to make on the world, all these different things, you can start to actually plan to make it happen. Like if you have a plan to reach 1 million people with the message, there's a specific action set that you can do to get people to be aware of this cause and get it, to more than 1 million people. Honestly, that there's billions of people out there. So hopefully you understand that it's like what you're focusing on, you attract, right? And this isn't some kind of law of attraction, like you're going to speak it into existence. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is what you focus on, you will see more of, right? If you're focusing on the good side of any given situation, you are going to be more likely when something bad happens to be able to see the good side, right? But if you're always focused on the negative, always, no matter what the situation is, you're always focused on the negative, doesn't matter how good the situation that pops up in front of you, your brain is going to be looking for the pattern that it's been looking for and focusing on, which is negativity. You ever notice when you get really upset or you're borderline about to cry or something, it almost like your brain is like, no, don't think happy thoughts. We're sad now. You know what I'm saying? Like the brain kind of almost is like, no, it feels good to be sad. Be sad more. The brain can be like that sometimes. I'm telling you, everyone thinks like, oh, you just follow your heart. And like sometimes the heart's a little deceitful sometimes, isn't it? So the whole point though is you want to get your goals listed out so that you can focus on them and actually know when you're moving closer to them. Because if you don't know that, you're not going to know when you're moving closer or further away from them. So write your goals out. Get clear and defined as to what those goals are. And I guarantee whether it's monetary goals, whether you're trying to make $60,000 a year, $100,000, $500,000, $1 million a year, whatever the goal is, there is an action set that you can devise to get to that point. And whether it's impact and you're trying to figure out how to get your message to as many people as possible, or to the people who are in front of you, how do you maximize the impact to their individual lives? There's an action set that you can take to achieve that goal as well. But you're never going to make progress on it if you don't focus on it. So I hope today's video gave you a lot of value and got you fired up to go figure out what your goals are so you can focus on it and start taking action towards those. If you think this is going to benefit anybody else, be sure to share this video. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and give me a comment too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this kind of stuff. It's always cool to hear from the community about all these different subjects. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on another Musicians Ignite.